Right. Again, welcome everyone. We'll just do a quick screen check section. It's always good to clear that out. Right. Mm, Right. Can everyone see this? The full screen?
Yes.
Okay. And the way I'm moving through the slides, are you able to see the full slide or just the?
We are not able to see the full slide.
Okay.
Yeah, we can see the main slide plus the next slide.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Okay. You see
notes.
what's going on.
Yeah.
Thanks. I'll fix that.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I was just trying to use multiple screens, but let me just continue with what we have. Right. So I'll just change this full screen. I hope you're able to see full screen now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can everyone confirm? Yeah.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. So again, welcome everyone, and I'm delighted you are here. So I think I gave an introduction about myself during the training. Sorry, during the webinar, but I'll do it again. So my name is Shubham, and I have been working for offensive, defensive, security, governance, risk and compliance, third-party risk management, supplier whole life cycle. So I've worked in many domains over the years. And what gives me the credentials to speak in front of all of you is that, and especially talking about CRISC, is that I cleared my CRISC exam myself. So having crossed the Amazon jungle, I might be able to help you. And in that process, help myself, strengthen my concept. So anyway, so I hope you enjoy the training as much as I do delivering them. But I just wanted to go through, because it's going to be probably 4 domains cover across multiple hours. So I thought it's only a good idea to run through the general approach or best practices on how we do the training. So I'm delighted all of you are here, and especially the fact that 2 of the students have recently passed the exam. And I think that's a very good encouragement, especially as a trainer. But right, I don't want to bore you with the details, so let's get started, right? So what approach do I take through the training, right? So the way what I told in my previous training, and the same thing I'm repeating here, is that any classroom training is like eating, dining in, and self-study is what is digesting. So as much as you would learn here, at the best, the training that can deliver you is heavy lifting. It can do the heavy lifting for you, prevent you from doing a lot of repetitive work, makes things easier for you. But at the end of the day, you have to digest what you have learned by doing self-study. And that's what I call it, eventually a success, right? So before taking an exam, right, I like to think, who are we dealing with? And in this case, we are dealing with ISACA, who's taking your exam. And when I say ISACA, you are dealing with ISACA ecosystem. Now you have to understand that it's not exactly purely mathematics all the time, but it's definitely logical, right? So why am I saying this? The reason I'm saying this is because we need to cater to ISACA ecosystem. We need to learn the ISACA mindset, and then only we'll be able to realize that, okay, in this scenario, ISACA wants us to do something. Because There are people who have 20 years of experience, and it's not guaranteed that once they appear for ISACA exam, they will pass it, because you know, they ask question from a certain mindset, and don't confuse years of experience as having the same. So that's why you would see college students also clearing this exam, because they learn the ISACA mindset, right? So moving on, what I have learned from my experience is they want you to know, or ISACA, or for any examination at a matter of point, they want you to know the concepts inside out. Can you explain it to someone in simplest of what's possible? Again, remember, it's a marathon, not a sprint. There are 4 domains, and the questions span over 150 minutes. So practice, right? Build stamina for 150 questions before you take up exam. I know it's a long way ahead, but still, I'm just giving you info beforehand. Now, AI use. Everyone's is using artificial intelligence. So again, use it as your assistant. Don't ask, again, I'm telling you my experience, because if you ask AI, it's mostly what it does, it agrees with you more or less. So you don't want someone to agree with you, because you're learning. So what you have to do, if you are going to take help of AI at all, I would highly recommend you that you tell the existing ISACA information to the AI, or the training information, or Hemang Doshi sir information, because they're all aligned. Our training, if you're reading Hemang Doshi sir Udemy course, their book, all are aligned to ISACA mindset. So whenever you're going to put any information in AI, you have to tell them that that's the information. Now help me with this, right? AI is not equivalent to ISACA mindset. It's just open source info, right? That's been heavily trained on, and it correlates data. So, right, what mistake did I do? Learn from my mistakes. I prioritize note taking very seriously, and sometimes to a cost of not, learning concept, thinking that, look, I have the notes and I will do it later, kind of thing. Don't rely on notes. I mean, and do I mean that you don't have to make notes? Absolutely not. You should make notes. But your goal of making notes is that you write it down somewhere so you never forget it. But the focus should always be on concepts. During the exam, what I realized is that your memory is not tested. Your understanding of concepts is tested, and how, when random scenarios are thrown at you during the test, how you apply the same concepts that you learned during the training, during your study period, that's what will determine your success, right? Richard Feynman, a famous physicist, I'm sure most of you would know him, he said that learn everything so that it becomes common sense, right? And that's what my goal was, and that's what my outcome was out of ISACA exam. I was not worried that in domain 3, what if I missed something, or domain 2, what if I missed something. I tried and understand everything from a common sense perspective first, and it helped me a lot. Believe me or not, it did help me, and that's what we are trying to do here. I'm not going to be lecturing too much around notes. Everyone can find notes open source. The way I deal with this is that I, of course, tell you the concepts. It's not that I skip it, but I mostly focus on question and answers, the dialogue, the discussion. So the format that I follow is that I go through the concepts, and then I heavily invest time and efforts into discussing question and answers. So I will be taking you through a PPT presentation, which has about 40, 50 questions, which are the toughest level, I would say, medium to high level, and we'll go through it. It will not be a test, of course, not, don't worry about it, but through the questions, we will, practice. There will be no right or wrong answer. That's not our goal. Our goal is to understand, because when I present a question to you, it doesn't mean that I'm taking your test. It simply means that there is an underlying concept behind the question, and that's what I want to go through, right? Moving on. Code of conduct, right? The housekeeping rules, right? If you have any questions, please raise your hands. It's a free world. You're more than welcome to ask me any questions, right? If it is time consuming, of course, I would not answer the question at the cost of other time. I'll probably take it offline. But sure, look, if it can be answered in short span of time, we can, absolutely. Active participation, yes. So I don't want this to be a podcast. I want this to be question, answers, dialogue, discussions, right? You can give me feedback. I've been told that I speak fast. Do I need to be slow, medium, whatever? And of course, keep your microphone on mute unless you're speaking, right? So it helps me focus. Anyway, most importantly, I wanted to discuss the change in syllabus, right? So as many of you would have this question, that what is in the change of syllabus? So I have something saved here. That's the change in syllabus. So what is happening is that domain 1 remains the same. Domain 2 is increased by 2%. Domain 3 remains intact, and domain 4 is reduced by 2%. So we don't have to worry anything at all about domain 1, 2, and 4. The only thing we have to be, and again, there are a few organizational or changes. When I say that, I mean that they have just moved few sections, maybe renamed few sections, but the content remains the same, right? Now, what was the content? The content is this. The content is that in domain 2, some concepts related to artificial intelligence, which is no surprise, large language models, LLMs, quantum computing in risk, and vulnerabilities related to that have been added. Some things that have been added in domain 4 would be zero trust architecture, ethics, and emerging tech risks, right? So why am I telling you this? Because it will all be covered at the end, right? So domain 1 to 4, we are going to study as it is, and whatever syllabus change has been there, we will cover it specifically so you are aware that, look, we are only studying what is the syllabus change here, and that's it, right? Now, I'll probably get into the domain, studying part, right? And before that, do you have any questions? And if yes, please speak. Till now, any questions, concerns? Okay, take it as a no. Moving on. Right. So I just wanted to get some definitions out of the way, right? Because I've seen many people give you glossary and everything, and I believe some basic definitions are a call for this time, right? So Hemang Doshi sir explains this very well. Now, again, before I start my training, I also want to say that all the questions, all the PPT presentation that you're going through is handmade by me, by the notes that I've made during my preparation, and I practically read every book. Sobhit Mehta's book, ISACA official resources, Hemang Doshi sir book I've read twice, and it's a amalgamation of all the domains, right? So it's like I crossed the Amazon, just have to, right? So the notes are very good, and the content has been verified. So right, there we go. Now, so this CRISC, right? We will study in detail what it is, but before, I wanted to just clear out a few terms, right? What is risk? CRISC is revolving around risk. Everything that we are going to study is more or less, except domain 4, would be either risk or governance of risk, right? So risk is nothing, any possibility of something negative happening, in simplest of words. If you want to be more formal, it's a potential for loss or harm when a threat exploits a vulnerability. Now, what is a threat, right? What is a threat? Threat is an unwanted incident, right? It's a potential cause of unwanted incident that could result in a harm. So, how do I say that? You're going out of the house and there's a thief standing in front of you. The thief is a threat, right? Probability, as you know, probability is nothing but likelihood. Impact means impact. What's the extent of damage or consequence if the risk happens? So how does it work? Risk is likelihood into impact. Simplest of that. Likelihood can be interchangeably used with the word probability, which I believe is the same. Probability, likelihood, they will keep using the same term interchangeably, right? So risk is nothing but a multiplication of likelihood of an event happening into what will be the impact if it happens, right? So what is the risk? Risk, let's say there is a risk of theft happening in your house, right? So there is a thief, there has been burglary going on in the neighborhood. So there is a risk of theft that might happen in your house as well. So what's the likelihood? Likelihood here is high. Again, we'll talk about quantitative and qualitative later, but let's say likelihood is very high at the moment. And the impact, if it's stolen, is again high. So the risk in total is high, right? So again, that's a subjective way of calculating risk, but we'll study in detail later as well, right? We'll study risk management life cycle in detail, which is nothing but the whole life cycle from how we, from the cradle to grave of risk, how we identify risk to how we keep on reporting it or monitoring it, right? And risk tolerance, simple. How much an organization is willing to tolerate the risk, the acceptable variation, right? So there is an appetite and then there is a tolerance, right? You might have appetite for eating one pizza, but your tolerance could be eating 1.5 pizza if it's your friend's birthday, right? But your capacity might be that if you eat more than 2 pizzas, you are at the risk of getting sick, right? So that's risk capacity, the maximum risk a person can take, right? Vulnerability, as you know, it's a weakness in the system, right? And there's a whole cycle that I wanted to explain you, right? So what happens? Threat agent, let's say a thief initiates a threat. The threat is he might be stealing something from your house. That exploits a vulnerability. What's the vulnerability? Well, your house is not locked. The front door or the back door key lock is broken. If the thief successfully exploits that vulnerability of you not having a proper lock in your backyard, it will cause an impact. The impact will be loss of money, loss of maybe your favorite PlayStation 5, right? And that, my friend, produces risk. That's a risk of, the potential risk is that your precious belongings could be stolen. So that's the whole, the way the whole life cycle works. Now, what is important here for you to understand is that this is the likelihood. How likely is the thief, right? How likely is the thief to steal from the house, right? So if they steal, this is the likelihood of threat occurring, and this is the likelihood of successfully causing impact, right? And this in turn cause impact. So likelihood into impact is basically what is called as risk. Again, you don't have to understand everything now. We'll study that in detail. But before I go, I just wanted to ask you one last question, was be around the timing. So I was wondering if this call can be moved in general from going ahead for all of our sessions, probably few hours back. Would it be possible? Or like, what's the public voting? Or maybe should I drop a poll in the group and people can respond?
I'm okay.
Are you okay?
What's the idea of preponing? How many hours?
Right. The idea is that I'm just simply not available on Friday at this time. So I was wondering if we can do Saturday more hours, probably increase a couple of hours on Saturday, or skip Friday altogether. Or if you like, we can have Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, maybe a little bit earlier.
I guess it's good that you only come up with a couple of approaches,
Okay.
and then you
Perfect.
decide on that. Because I know, being in US, I am also juggling between my calls and this particular training. So we can take a final call.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. Yes, that's the best option, because I had to make an excuse to my manager to give this training today. So, but look, thank you for that. I will be sending a poll in the group, and we'll take care of that later. Yeah. Okay, moving on. Right, I'll share my screen again. Thanks for muting, and there we go. Right. Where can I don't think you can see this. Right. So I hope you're able to see my screen. And right, if not, let me know. And right. So before we start serious journey, right, I wanted to quickly give you an idea of what something you might already be knowing. right? How many domains are there in ISACA? Well, there are 4 domains. Domain 1 is governance. Domain 2 is IT risk assessment. Domain 3 is IT risk response and reporting. Domain 4 is information technology and security, right? So when I say domains, domains are divided into part A and part B. Sometimes for domain 3, it's divided into part C. That's why you are seeing the domain 3 carrying the highest weightage of 32%. And the core part where we would be studying about risk would be domain 2 and domain 3. Domain 1 would be mostly giving you an introduction on risk and mostly on the governance part, right? Domain 2 would be the how we would initiate the risk assessment, which would be from identifying, so it's domain 2 and 3 constitutes as the full life cycle of risk, if I can speak that way, right? Because we are going to study the risk life cycle, which is at the heart of the training. So domain 2 and domain 3 are, again, I repeat, are the risk life cycle. Okay, and domain 4 is all about IT and security. Now, I can understand the question that some of you folks might be having around not having IT background, because I've been asked this question many times before, is that what if, like, I'm not an IT guy, what should I do? So you have to understand that ISACA will not take you very, very deep in domain 4. There is some amount of concepts, and there is, you don't have to go into very, very much depth. There is a slight depth, of course, but it's not a big depth that you have to go through. So just, I would say, the regular amount of hard work that you do, just put a little bit extra if it's a new area for you at all, and then you should be fine. Because, ISACA is not looking to cause trouble for non-IT people. It's just there is a knowledge that you need to be aware of. If you're aware of it, you're good to go. Okay, right. Let's start. Domain 1, governance. I hope you're able to see my full screen. I'm very excited for this journey, and let's start. Okay. Now, what is CRISC? We are starting the journey, so we have to understand the very first question that comes through. What is CRISC? Right? Many of you would be thinking that it's a certification. Well, you're partially right, but it also means something, right? It simply means that find the risk, manage all the risk, so that they don't harm your business. It's as simple as that. That's what ISACA wants you to know about CRISC, right? If I were to summarize in few sentences, right? Find the risk, do the whole life cycle, manage those risks so that they don't end up hurting your organization. And of course, in order for the risk not to hurt your organization, you have to put right controls in place. What are controls? Controls are anything that you put to prevent negative things from happening, right? You lock your car, you lock your house, you lock your laptop. Why do you do that? These are all controls. Firewall is a control. Anti-malware softwares are a control. SIEM solutions are controls, right? Encryption is a control, right? So control is anything that you put to prevent anything negative from happening. If I speak very, very simplistically, right? Now, how do I break down this CRISC, right? Certified, as you know, person has proven their skills in risk and control management. Risk, as you are all aware, it's how likely, a threat is to exploit a particular vulnerability, right? There is a threat, thief, vulnerability, your house is not locked, or, your back door is open. And the risk could be that if the thief, that is the threat, would successfully exploit the vulnerability, that is the open door, causing a risk that is potential loss of money and your favorite PlayStation, right? Information systems, as you know, any system that processes information. That could be people, process, technology, anything. People processes information all the time, right? Technologies, any data systems, anything in business use that touches information at any level. Emails, your laptop, people working on it, processes, technologies, anything that touches data, right? Controls, as I just told you, they are safeguards or actions that you put in place to reduce or manage risk, right? And control, right? So, sorry, I think S stands for safeguard here. I probably had a typo. Apologies about that. Right. Sorry, apologies of that. But S stands for safeguards, right? What are the safeguards or actions that you put in place? And control is that you are ensuring that risks are handled properly, right? So the business operations stay secure and reliable, right? Now, so as you understand, you are certified, you have proven your skills in identifying and understanding the whole how to manage the risk within information system, right? And now that you understand the risk within information system, you can put safeguards in place and you can put controls in place so that the risks are handled properly and business operations stay secure and reliable. Can I make it more simple? Absolutely. There is a risk in information system which deals with information data, confidential, highly confidential data all the time. You have to manage the risk. That's why you are certified. And when you manage the risk, you also put controls in place so that the business is not facing any loss. The business operation stays secure, right? So that's all your job is. If you're certified, that's what you will be doing, right? So I hope I've been able to make it as simple as possible, right? Now that I got the definition of C-risk out of the way, and let's start this part A. And sorry, I forgot to mention that I usually take dinner breaks at about halfway during the session. So ideally it's 20 minutes break. I hope that's okay with you all. And if not, you can always grab your lunch and come back to the training. So I am just going to, yeah. So what's the time? 7:30 in India, right? I'm just going to set an alarm so I don't forget. So yeah, 4 o'clock Ireland time. Yeah, sorry, I just in the interest of full disclosure, I'm in UK time. So I'm in Ireland at the moment. So right, dinner break. Okay, let's get started. Right, so what is the part A of this domain one? Domain one is governance. So the part A is organizational governance, and the second, I believe, is the risk governance, right? So I intend to take a break probably halfway during the session, right? So, right, let's get started. Again, I'm going full screen, so if you're not able to see, please let me know. Okay, right. So we are studying organizational governance, right? So what that basically means is how you are governing at an organization level, right? People would be asking, what is governing? What is governance, right? So governance is basically, think of it like government, right? The government of India, what they are doing. They are governing the country. How they are governing it by a set of rules and regulations, set of do's and don'ts, set of best practices. And if they are not adhered to, that will cause trouble, right? So think of governance like that, right? So when we talk of governance at an organizational level, it's the same thing. These are the set of policies that should be adhered to, do's and don'ts, right? That's why you have employee handbooks. And again, we have set of IT policies, you have set of HR policy, you have set of legal policy. Every department has a certain policies. That's policy, process, procedure, you name it, and that's how they work, right? And why is governance necessary? Well, if you don't govern, people are going to do anything they want. Don't you think that applies to government of India or any state, country for that matter? People are going to do whatever they want to do. It's like, a boat rowing with no direction. Anyone can do anything, and everything is unaccounted for, pure chaos. That's why governance is put in place. What does governance do? Governance tells you that you have to balance performance with conformance, right? Again, high level English. What does it mean in simple language? Well, think about this. If a government of India is letting automobile industry to run its business in India, while they would highly encourage them to make as many cars as possible, right? But they would also want them to conform to particular laws, to conform to particular regulation that has been made by the government. They would conform to certain policies of the government. Why? Think about it. If you do not put any governance on businesses, right, don't you think they will be doing anything they want to? They would be making cars that are very cheap, but they are not secure at all. So they don't think of customer, they only think of making money. Imagine that extrapolating to pharmaceutical companies. They are making drugs every now and then, which are going to hurt common people, right? So while they are able to achieve the performance part, well, yes, the CEO is getting rich, right? But the people are going to get hurt. So there is no conformance here, right? Now, how do I translate this into an organization? Same goes with organization. Organization wants to set up rules and regulations. While on one hand, they want to have fantastic performance, off the charts profits in all the quarters. That's basically called achieving strategic goals, but they also want to do it while conforming to the laws, regulation, and internal policies. Because if they don't do it, right, let's say they're, an organization is making someone work 7 days a week, all month throughout the year. Well, that's violation of labor laws, right? A company, an organization is not taking their environmental sustainability and governance, ESG, the whole climate change, the carbon dioxide you're releasing, blah, blah, blah. If they are not taking that seriously, well, they might be fined or it doesn't look good on them, right? And what else can I tell you? If they are not adhering to the laws, well, first of all, their business would be shut down. If they're not adhering to regulations, it means, for example, in Europe, there's a big regulation called GDPR. If they don't adhere to that, well, you are basically inviting millions of euros of fine, right? So that's why governance comes into the picture. While on one hand, you have to perform as a company, fantastic, that's your job, but you also have to conform. When I say conform, you have to conform to laws. You have to conform to regulations. Regulation could be of industry. Regulation could be set out by government, example, GDPR. If it's set by the, common best practice, for example, how do I say that? ISO ones, right? There are a lot of ISO standards. So if you're adhering to standards, those are the standards. I think when I say standard, it could also translate to PCI DSS, which means payment card industry, some digital security, something. Again, what are these? These are standard. So you have to perform and you also have to conform. I hope this governance part was crystal clear, right? Now, any questions till now? Okay, moving on. Now, how is governance driven by? Well, simply, if you're running a business in any country, there are a set of external requirements that's like laws and regulations that you have to meet. Or governance can be set for yourself. The way we make routine for ourselves, that 6 o'clock we are going to get up, 7 o'clock meditation, etc., etc. Same way, you're going to set an internal standard that this is how I want my company to operate. We are going to, do this. We are not going to do that, right? So this is how you can implement governance to an organization, right? Now, many people are getting confused between governance and management. Believe me, they are not the same thing. Management does planning and operation. Governance is not equal to management, and governance sets objectives. And that's objective that was set by the governance. That's what management delivers, right? So if you think of governance as rules and regulation, well, that's the job of management to deliver to them, right? So what will management do? Simple. Their job is to balance and conformance, basically overseeing the fact that it's being done, right? Moving on. Now, risk is all we are going to discuss for the next probably 2-3 domains, right? So I wanted to give you a context and approach on how to approach this risk management in an easiest way or most optimized way possible, right? So risk management is nothing but managing the risk, right? Risk, you already know, anything that has potential to cause harm, if any potential risk to us, the company, right? So what's the primary objective of risk management? It's basically to manage risk in simplest of what's possible. Primary objective is to manage the risk and maintain the risk within acceptable levels, right? It's like manager managing their team. The risk has to be within acceptable levels. Same goes with the company, right? And what's the acceptable level of risk? Well, that's for the company to decide. right? So that's all the risk management does. It manages the risk and ensures it is within acceptable levels, right? And what those risks could be? Risk could be anything, right? Risk is anything that prevents an organization from achieving its objective or its goals, right? I can name 100 of risks in front of you. The risk could be financial risk, company losing money. The risk could be reputational risk, company losing its reputation. Risk could be regulatory risk. If the company does not adhere to regulations such as GDPR, it invites financial risk, potential fines, loss of face, reputational risk, right? And so again, just like that, I named 3 risks, right? The risk could be IT risk could be for particular departments. So risk can be n number of things which can potentially prevent an organization from achieving its objective or goals. Because think about it, organizations has set a goal that in Q3 I'm going to earn 5 million euros. Fantastic, happy days. But there is a regulatory risk. If we do not meet a certain regulation, we are going to be fined 3 million euros, which will take away from our profit, right? So how you might be asking me a question like, how is risk related to business goals? Well, simple, because if an organization exists, it only exists because it has certain objective. I hope you will agree with me saying that, right? If it has certain objective, then the risk will be preventing an organization from achieving that objective. And that's where you guys come into the picture. You guys are the barriers between risk that can potentially hurt an organization from achieving its business goals, right? So that's why I'm saying risk management must be aligned with business objective of the organization. So one thing I want all of you to probably keep in your mind throughout the training is that when you are doing risk management, right, you are not doing it in silos or in isolation that, okay, my job is only to manage the risk. No, you are directly related to the strategy of the organization. Your work, basically, your work is basically making sure that the business continue to achieve its objective. So that's why it's said that C-risk is a sort of a managerial role as well, right? So anything that you do in risk management, it has to be aligned with the business objective, right? So if the business is going in one direction, you follow the business. It's as simple as that, right? Now, when you say risk management, there's a lot of question that can arise, right? Like, risk management for what? For one department, for 2 departments, for all the departments, or how we are going to manage the risk, right? Show me the picture. Well, the bigger picture is that when we do risk management, we do it for the entire organization, right? It doesn't work in isolation. It doesn't mean that, okay, in finance, we are going to manage their risk, but we are going to skip human resources, or we are going to skip accounting department for that matter. No, there has to be an enterprise-wide risk management. It's an umbrella that covers all the department of the organization. There's one single uniform, which means it doesn't changes for departments, standardized risk management approach, which is applied to entire enterprise without modification or customization. Okay, so why do we do that? People might ask question, hey, why don't you have a different set of risk management for one domain, or sorry, one department, and having a different set of risk management for a different department? Well, the simple question I would ask you in that case is, how are you going to compare the risk between one department and the other, right? Because you're sitting at the top, right? And you're looking at the whole organization, and you are telling me that finance has a different process for risk management. IT has a different process of risk management. The risk scoring that is coming out of finance is X, and the risk scoring that is coming out of IT is Y. Well, how am I going to compare it when the processes of measuring the risk are totally different, right? So don't you think it's a good idea to have a single standardized risk management that applies throughout the organization as a blanket or an umbrella? And through this way, you can say that, we are applying the same methodology for risk management throughout the organization, and hence you can easily compare the risk between the departments. And that's where you will be easily able to know, okay, you know what, in terms of risk management, our human resources are struggling. There's a lot of risk in that area, right? You might be thinking that, by that logic, finance is doing pretty well. Finance has less risk. So what you will do? You have done a risk assessment for the whole organization, and you know that human resources department has the most amount of risk, and finance has the least, and rest of the department we don't have to worry about. So when you know that you have a problem, what are you going to do? Simply, you are going to address them. You are going to reduce the risk or the number of risk that is within the human resource department. As simple as that, right? It's like, you knowing that you have a particular health problem, but you're not going to simply sit out. You're going to solve that by going to the doctor. Similarly, here you realize that the amount of risk that is within one department is more and one department is less. By applying a same uniform standardized risk management, well, that simply means that, okay, this department needs my attention, so let me give that department more resources. Okay, so that's why standardization of risk management is critical. Okay, any questions?
I have one question. Can you just go to previous slide? So as you
Sure.
said, it should be unified and uniform and standardized risk management approach.
Yeah.
Entire enterprise without modifications. So we generally assess risks from vulnerability risk management and also from vendor risk management and from other risk management like IT risk management as well, right? So how we can make all these 3 or 4 platforms of risk management into one approach, because TPRM risk management policy has its
Yeah.
own procedure and vulnerability risk management has its own procedure, right? So how does this fit in here, this statement?
Absolutely, it's a good point. So as you would agree that all these third parties or TPRM, like you said, vendors, like you said, they have their own ways of measuring the risk. Even if you forget about us having a risk management, even if from your point of view, if you tried and said that how about we match the process that you're using for risk assessment, that would be totally different, right? So the way we are going to unify this is that we are going to have one single process for risk. Again, when I go to next slides, it will be more clear, but just to answer your question, I have to give more info, is that you will have a single risk management process, right? Through that, what you will do, you will have a one single way of identifying risk. That could be once a month week meeting with all the stakeholders, basically head of departments for everyone, for all the company, right? They tell you that these are the risks that is within their within their team, right? That means that you have to create a culture of risk so that people are not afraid of risk, right? So that's one single way of identifying risk. Now it comes to evaluating the risk, right? Or how do I say, it's analyzing the risk, right? Now when I say analyzing the risk, you use one methodology, which I'm not going to get into detail how. It's big topic for the next few domains. So you are going to analyze the risk. Analyzing the risk is something that will be done by you as a risk team, right? And then you will also be doing evaluating, means is the risk above or beyond my acceptable levels? If it is beyond acceptable levels, you need to do something. If it is within it, you are happy days, you don't need to do anything. Again, if it's beyond the risk acceptance level, you're going to take actions. For example, if there's no malware, there's no anti-malware, you have to go install an anti-malware. That's the mitigation strategy use, right? So, right, and once you install it, you have to keep monitoring and reporting it. So you see the whole life cycle, right? This is the life cycle that I'm talking about. You might have vendor risk assessment operating independently. Fine, it's their area. Third-party risk management operating, in their department. Fine, that's fine. But they have to cater to you. So let's say that you are implementing a fresh risk management in your team. You're the first one hired. The company did not have a risk management program before, and you are launching your own risk management for the first time. So all of the teams that have separate risk management going on, right? You will meet all of them, and then you will have opened a risk register, is what we call it as. And within that, you will identify the risk. You will write down the risk description. You will write down what is the threat. You will write down what is the vulnerability. You will write down what is the likelihood of that threat exploiting that vulnerability. You will write down what will be the impact if the threat successfully exploits the vulnerability. You will multiply that likelihood with that impact, come up with a score. So you're seeing the drill, right? How it is working. So yes, to answer your question, yes, your TPRM could have a separate process on managing the risk. Vendor could have a separate risk management, but this risk management is totally different. And and if they are related at all, they have to align to you, right? So what that means is simply having a meeting with them, asking them what are the risks that are currently within your team, and then in the format that I just described, they will tell you the data and you will note down. And at the end of the day, you will have a risk score, and then you have to make a decision on them, what to do with this risk, etc., etc., etc. Did that answer your question?
Yes, identifying a point like it was so good, like sitting with heads and writing the risks in their processes. Yeah, now I understood. Yeah,
Yeah.
got it.
So one line. Sorry if I had to give more details, because the question that you asked touched domain 2 and domain 3 together, but I had to answer.
Okay, let's wait
Yes.
for those domains then. Yeah, thanks.
Yes. So to answer in one sentence, it's like you have a particular format of risk managing the risk. Your organization has given you resource and authority to run your own show, and the other stakeholders will cater to the format of risk management that you are running. Okay. Okay, moving on. Right. So starts the risk management lifecycle. It's at the heart of domain 1, especially domain 2 and 3. Right. The topics that you're seeing right now is, again, how do I say, they branch out heavily. Right. It's going to be fun, but yeah. So how do we do the risk management? Well, risk management is simple. The life cycle of you managing the risk. It starts with, or the birthplace is the risk identification, right? Before risk identification, the company has to identify all of its assets. I want you to remember this, right? When you are going to identify risk, you have to identify risk within a particular process where assets are going to be involved. Of course, could be it physical assets, technical assets, human assets, whatever. But you are going to identify risk anywhere there has to be particular level of assets. That's where that's also related to vulnerability management. When you're finding vulnerabilities, well, where are you going to find vulnerabilities? You have to have assets where you're going to find vulnerability. So first step is risk identification. Identify the risk within the current processes, current systems, current assets, right? When you have identified those, you assess them. What does assessment means? It basically means analysis plus evaluation. We'll study that in detail in coming slides. Once you have assessed, of course, it's like knowing you have a disease. You're not going to sit idly. You are going to respond to it. And when I say respond, one of the major or commonly used option is mitigation, but it's not always used, right? And the next thing that we do is risk and control, monitoring and reporting, right? If you see the extra keyword has come up here, control. Why? Well, we'll discuss in detail in the coming slides, but when you mitigate, you put a control. So if there is a risk, you wanted to mitigate it. Let's say there is, just the example that we discussed. Let's say the company has no asset management solution, right? So that's a risk in itself. The threat is that, the vulnerabilities could not be identified, and it would, how do I say that? If you don't manage your assets, how are you going to track them? There's a whole set of risk within there. I don't want to go into details. So that's a risk. There's no asset management solution. You want to mitigate the risk. So you have put a control. That's why the control is coming in here. So when you put a control, let's say asset management solution, you not only monitor the risk, you also monitor how my control is doing. Is my control working well? Right? Risk and control are correlated. Again, I'll tell you everything in the coming slides. Okay.
Yeah, just one question here, Shubham. What do you mean by control exactly? When we say control implementation, do we mean tools or documents, or what exactly? Can you highlight it?
You have answered yourself. It's everything. Anything that you can put to, think of it as a safeguard, right? If the risk is that, you don't have a incident management process, well, if incident happens, what are you going to do? So what do? We put a control. The control name is a document called incident response process. So there you go. A document can be a control. A software can be a control. You don't have asset management solution, you implement an asset management solution. So in this case, software becomes a control. In your daily life, your if you don't put password on your phone, well, if it's stolen, then there's a problem. So what do? You put control, that is, lock your phone with passcodes, Face ID. Control can be anything. Think of it as a safeguard.
Okay. So whatever document we prepare ideally needs to be implemented in the organization as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Well, I mean, it could be like, how about say that? Like, think of it an internal document, right? Let's say you're a software development team and there is no standard process or a SOP on how you do software development. Well, that's a problem because, how are everyone going to meet a certain standard for software development? So what do? You develop an internal standard operating procedure for software development, which all of your developers are going to refer. You draft something, you get it reviewed by everyone. That also becomes a control. Now, is that control available to everyone? No, it depends on the context. Control could be small, control could be very big, such as employee handbook applies to all the employees. However, software development internal SOP applies to only developers. So think of it as safeguard, right? Anything that we can put in place to prevent the risk.
Yep, got it. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. Now, the risk management lifecycle. So as I said, it starts with identifying the risk, but there's one caveat to that. Before risk identification, you have to have identified all your assets, okay? All your processes, right? Because if you don't know what's going on in your company and what assets are involved, well, where are you going to identify the risk from, right? So identify the risk. What context is it, right? Risk could be financial, could be reputational, could be regulational, could be legal, right? The risk could be anything. So you have to identify the scope of the risk, right? You have to identify assets. Assets, when I say it's people, the employees, the process. Process could be anything. How do you develop a process? How do you apply for a reimbursement? Anything, right? Anything a company does is a process. Technology, what are the technologies involved? Do you use blockchain, AI? Do you use, what level of encryption do you use? Anything, right? What are the value of those assets? Higher the value, more the risk. What are the threats, vulnerabilities, and most importantly, existing controls? One of the biases that I had while studying was that I used to think that when there is a risk, there is 100% risk and no control. That's not like that. So again, we will study a capability maturity model going ahead, which will tell this in a detail. But whenever you identify risk, always keep in mind that there could be existing controls as well, which would be, keeping the risk in little bit of place, right? For example, if you, instead of having nothing, you have something, right? So existing controls you always keep in mind when you're identifying risk, because the more control you have, the lesser the risk is there. Think about it, right? If you have, let's say, 5-step of authentication within your phone, don't you think the risk of somebody accessing your phone in an unauthorized manner would be less, right? So again, it depends. The more controls you have, let's say the more security controls you have in this case, the lesser the risk. And again, the control and risk depends on the context, right? Now, what happens once you do a risk identification? Well, you come up with a list of potential risk, right? Now, people might be imagining, how do we do risk identification? Again, find out all the departments that you are going to apply this risk management on. Depending on the business decision by the senior management, they will tell that, okay, we have 20 domains within the company, 20 departments. Let's start with 5. So what are you going to do? You're going to meet the 5 head of departments, ask them, there is the risk register. Tell me what are the risks within your organization, within your departments. And there you go. You have a documented list of potential risk. Somebody in finance could tell you that, look, I mean, the password within my Sage payroll software is just very weak. It's just password 123, right? And there is no segregation of duties within the finance department, which means that anyone can make a transaction and approve it, right? So this is how you go about identifying risk. People are being honest, and sometimes you also audit them. So when you audit, again, when somebody audits them, they have a certain set of findings which you can also put in risk identification as a risk identification in risk register. What I mean is that all the departments are audited. So when they are audited, there comes findings. Those findings are nothing but risk. They can also be fed into risk register. Okay. Now, importantly, you have identified risk, so you know that X, Y, Z are the risk. What are you going to do about that? Right? So what you're going to do is that you are going to analyze and evaluate, right? So risk assessment includes analysis of risk analysis, and risk evaluation. Now, what does that mean? Right? When you identify risk, don't you want to know what's the level of risk? Right? Low, medium, high. That, right? Low, medium, high is nothing but qualitative, right? Which means there's nothing numbers associated with it. And you can also identify risk in a quantitative manner, which is percentage, numbers, dollars. Example, you identified that there is a particular level of risk and the level of risk is high. So that is qualitative risk assessment. If you have identified a risk and you realize that if this happens, for example, if earthquake happens, one of our data center is going to be destroyed, which means that there are going to be $100,000 of loss. This loss in this case is nothing but quantitative. As you know, the term quantitative, quantity, numbers, data, facts. Qualitative, subjective. My definition of low could be different than your definition of low. Now, you might be thinking qualitative is bad, huh? Or quantitative sounds good because it's more precise. No, that is one thing ISACA wants you to know. It depends on the scenario. It depends on the data that you have available. Don't think of qualitative. Again, that's one bias I had. Sorry, you might not have it. But don't think qualitative is not good risk assessment and quantitative is, because it has numbers associated with it. I am a math guy, tech guy, so I have a bias towards numbers and facts. So it depends. Sometimes you will not have enough data to do a quantitative risk assessment. Again, we'll read that in the detail in the future. And all you have options left is to do qualitative risk assessment. So what's the likelihood of risk happening? Low, right? For example, let's take example of flood, right? Does flood happen every day? No. What's the likelihood? Low, but impact will be very high if it happens, right? So low into very high could, maybe you can come up with a high impact, right? This is because you have no prior data to do that, right? If you never had a flood in that area, or you have no data to begin with, how are you going to do that? That's when, so you have no numbers or data to do quantitative risk assessment. So you do a qualitative risk assessment, right? So why do we do risk, right? Sorry, when I say assessment, I mean analysis here. Apologies, right? Now, why do we do risk analysis? To determine the level of risk. Is the level of risk high, very high? Or, in terms of money, the risk of potential loss of $100,000, right? There's a 90% of risk, chances of risk happening, right? Now, once we determine the level of risk, that's where we go into evaluation. Evaluation is evaluate, means compare the level of risk with the level of risk your organization can accept. So on one hand, you have a level of risk that yes, if the data center gets destroyed in a flood, there is a risk of $100,000, right? Compare that with your organization risk appetite. Now, organization risk appetite could be like, look, in 1 year, organization is willing to face losses of $50,000, right? Now, as you know, the $100,000, that's the potential risk here. The risk level is way higher, or at least double than your risk appetite, which means the current level of risk is way higher than what your organization can accept, which means we need to do something about it. That's what we'll be doing in the next slides, right? Now, so don't you think like once you have analyzed the level of risk and evaluated whether it's above or below my appetite, you will know which risk needs treatment and which don't? Because if there is a risk that is within your acceptable levels, well, you don't need to do anything. You can accept it, right? You can just accept it. But if there is a risk that is beyond your acceptance level, well, then you have to do something about it, right? Again, both of these are covered in detail in domain 2, so I'm not going to go into details, right? So once you have done a risk assessment for all the risk that you have noted down by doing a meeting with your stakeholders, is that you have a set of risk in which you have prioritized list of confirmed risk. So you might have hundreds of risk identified by having a meeting with each of the departments, but you only have 10 risks that are prioritized, right? And those are the risks you will be doing a response on. What does risk response means? Simply, I know I have a headache, I know I need to do something. Similarly, I know I have a risk, I need to do something about the risk, right? So what do we do about risk? Again, without going into detail, because it's covered in high detail in domain 3, is that we have 4 options, right? When we are responding to a particular risk, do we avoid it, run away from it? Do we accept it because it's harmless? Do we mitigate it? Because you remember the example I just gave you. Data center gets flooded, $100,000 of loss. Your risk appetite of your organization in 1 year or annually is $50,000. The level of risk is double, right? The current level of risk is double your risk acceptance level. So what do? You mitigate it. You have no choice but to mitigate it, right? Or you can also choose the other option, transfer or share, right? That is nothing but taking insurance, right? Again, we'll study all of it in detail. I just wanted to introduce you to these concepts, right? Now, so mitigating could mean a lot of options. Mitigating could simply mean put controls in place to mitigate risk, could mean security control, firewall, antivirus, in BitLocker, full disk encryption, put policies in place, as one of the gentlemen just pointed out about documents, policy, procedure, training. Your user keeps clicking on phishing emails. That's a risk in itself. What do? You put control in place. What is the control in place? You train the user. See, the training is also a control in this regard. So control could be anything, right? Now, what else do you do? Once you identify a control that, okay, I'm going to train the users, you identify action plan, right? It's not enough to just say that, okay, user keeps clicking on phishing email. That's a risk. I'm going to mitigate the risk. I'm going to train the risk. Well, that's not where the program stops. What? Train the user? How do you mean train the user? What's the action plan? Right? That's the $1 million question, which means that the answer will be, okay, you know what? I'm going to speak to third parties who give phishing trainings, phishing simulation, whatever, and I'm going to, buy licenses, maybe 20, 30 licenses, assign one of licenses to each of the user who click on phishing link, make the mandatory training for all of them, have them complete the training, have them give a test that evidences the fact that they understand that they don't have to click on the phishing email, and then take the certification of completion as an evidence that this user used to click on phishing emails, these 20 users, I've given them training, I bought licenses, and now I have a certificate proving that these users have achieved the level of competency when it comes to phishing domain, right? Now, when you create action plan, you also put deadlines. The task cannot go forever. You have to assign it to a person. Well, who is going to do it, right? And you have to allocate resources. If you don't, in this example of user clicking phishing email, if the management doesn't give you funds, well, how are you going to buy training programs, right? Okay, so this is how we deal with the whole risk management lifecycle. Okay, again, this is an introduction. I hope it was clear, but we'll cover in detail in the next section. Okay, moving on. The next,
just one question. Once again, I have a question. Traditionally, we've always talked about risk priority number, RPN. So where will risk priority number, RPN, come over here?
In here, after risk assessment. Because you see, what is the outcome of risk assessment? It's a risk prioritization. Basically, you have identified 100 risks. Out of those 100 risks, you have done analysis and evaluation on all the 100 risks, and you realize that only 20 risks are high risk that needs immediate attention. They are priority. Okay. So those 20 risks are basically what is prioritized, which will be taken more seriously. So at basically end of second stage, beginning of third stage.
Okay.
Okay, and the second stage is risk assessment. After risk assessment is the answer.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I also do have a question.
Sure.
Coming to the previous slide, when it comes to risk response or treatment, I'm assuming that it can be used interchangeably, right? The
It
treatment?
can, yes. Risk treatment is a broader term, right?
Okay. Now, when it comes to these 4 options for risk response, I have also seen in my past experience, some of them also use exception risk. Where does that
Yes.
fall?
Yes, so the risk exception is something that goes in your risk register. That's a fantastic question, right?
Some of them do have the risk acceptance exception forms on those levels. So
Yes.
I just want to see how it plugs
Well,
into this.
every look, I'll give you a general concept, but every company has a different process on how they manage exceptions, right? Most of the companies have an exception management process or policy. Because, again, just to give a general background to everyone, while we keep talking policy, procedure, process, right? Sometimes it's not feasible to follow it step by step, or sometimes the benefit of, the business opportunity of not exactly doing what policy says is more than the risk, right? Because if you don't follow the policy, it's a risk. But there are sometimes the benefit exceeds the amount of risk. That's why our organization decides that I'm going to make an exception for this particular process or this particular policy, right? So exception, basically, to answer your question, goes into your risk register, right? So think of it as a general entry into risk register, right? For example, your company has blocked social media, right? But your marketing team needs social media to reach out to people, which means that at proxy level, the IP addresses of your marketing team needs to be whitelisted, which means that every time they hit Facebook, Instagram, they are allowed access. But if I am in IT, I open those websites, well, it's not accessible to me. So what is it? What did we do here? We made an exception for marketing team. Right?
My
Because there's a big
understanding
business
over here,
reason.
is I might either do a mitigation first to see, and if not, then I would go for an exception.
I'm coming to it. I'm coming to it, right? I'll come to it in a bit, right? So let's say that we have a risk here, right? So that we want to, so let's say that we have not taken any decision, right? Marketing has come to you and you are the risk manager and says that, look, we are marketing team and I see that security team has applied a company-wide policy. Nobody is going to access social media. Well, we need it to reach out to people. Fine, fair enough. Well, what do? Your company policy says no social media for everyone. So what do? Well, you have to make an exception. So what do? You put that entry in the risk register, right? Exception for for web filtering or proxy level, that allowing certain people to access. Then you're going to do the whole risk management life cycle: identification, analysis, evaluation, come up with a risk score, make a decision, what are we going to do, and in which case you realize that you have to mitigate it, right? Which means that you are going to call your network security team and tell them, or write them an email saying that this IP address needs to be whitelisted. They will whitelist them. Tomorrow onwards, they are able to access the social media. Happy days. So what did we do here? We mitigated this risk. But you could maybe, again, remember, the decision is not yours. By the way, sorry, I forgot to tell you that. You have to speak with the relevant stakeholders, which in this case, it could be management, right? Management can say that, okay, go ahead, allow them to use social media, or they can say that, no, I don't care if they are marketing team. And forgive me if I'm using a very simplistic example. I just want to make the concept clear. So the management, you talking to management could mean that the management will tell that, look, I don't care. If there is a risk of them not reaching out to, people, whatever, I don't care. There is a risk that you want to make an exception. I'm going to accept. I don't care. So in this case, it could be accepting. Does that make sense to you?
Clear. Yes, definitely. Because my understanding is when it comes to exceptions, it's an acceptance of risk, and then there is an exception to add few mitigating controls at a certain frequency or time period. But then it has to be evaluated again to see if we can mitigate, transfer, avoid, or accept.
Absolutely. Look, if I totally agree with you, because if you make an exception today, right? For example, I am an admin and I don't need to go through certain process. Or forget, let's don't make it complicated. any exceptions that you give to anyone in the company for any of the policies, it is not permanent. It is reviewed annually as a best practice, right? So again, the decision could be to the management, right? So how do I say that? So when you make an entry in the risk register saying that, this is the particular scenario they want to access, you know that there's a level of risk. There is a reason that people have put a control, no social media. Why? Well, people can post sensitive stuff, people can upload document, people can, well, the best example I can take, and sorry if I'm digressing, is the example of Google Drive or Gmail. Many companies block it, but how will HR reach to candidates if it is blocked? Which means HR had an exception here. But there is an inherent risk. If I have Google Drive, I can upload all my company documents and send it to my social media. Don't you think it's a risk? Right? So there's a risk. That's why the company has implemented a company-wide policy. Nobody in the company accesses Google Mail or Google Workspace, Google Drive, whatever. Right? So because there is a risk. Now HR comes to you and says that, well, how are you going to reach out to candidates? Which means you have to make an exception. Now, will you make an exception right away? Absolutely not. Well, first of all, you are in a consulting position. Always remember that. You are not the decision maker here. You as a risk, when I say you as a risk practitioner. So you will talk to senior management, and then you and the senior management and the relevant stakeholders might have a meeting, in which case all of you are going to decide. There's a risk, that's why we have blocked it, but there we need to make an exception. Let's analyze this exception. Let's see the level of risk if we make this exception. And that's when the whole life cycle will begin of risk identification, analysis, evaluation, response. Now management might make a decision at the end, right? Because you are going to be there as a subject matter expert for the risk management. So management can make a decision, okay, we are going to accept it. We are going to mitigate it. They're not going to avoid it, because avoiding would mean getting rid of HR department. So, they can make any decision. If they accept it, happy days, no action required, and they will let them use social media or let them use Google Workspace. They will accept the risk of HR using Google Mail, or they will say that, mitigate it. Let's do something about it. Okay.
It's clear.
Thank you. Right. Moving on. So I think I'm going a bit slow, but okay. Risk and control monitoring and reporting, right? The reason I said risk control here is, you might be wondering why this word control crept out here, because previously it was all risk identification, assessment, blah, blah, blah. But here it's risk and control monitoring. Well, it's simple. If you mitigate a risk, you put a control in place. As simple as that. If you were audited and the auditor realized that your company or your team does not have an SOP or internal document, that's a finding. So what did you do? You drafted it, you got it approved. That's document is a control. So once you made that control, well, you're not going to forget about it, are you? You're going to review it at least annually, or when significant changes occur. You're going to monitor that that control. If the control is firewall, again, you have to keep looking at the stats. So once you address a risk, respond to a risk, you don't leave the risk and go to beds. You monitor the risk. You monitor the risk, you report on the risk, right? The whole domain 3 is risk and control monitoring and reporting, right? So I'm not going to go into details. So how do we do monitor? Right? Monitor, at regular intervals. How do you report? Well, reporting can be done through dashboards, could be manual reports, right? Continuous monitoring could be a regular risk review, have continuous meeting with people. Continuously, you have 100 risk in your risk register. Keep meeting everyone at least once a month, right? So, right. So I'm going to move on. And right. So the next section is IT's risk strategy of the business. Right. So whenever you are going to make a risk strategy, right, on how we are going to do the whole risk management that we just discussed, you have to understand that you are like a coach that's supporting the engine. If I can take an example of railway, right? All the coaches go in the same direction as the engine goes, right? So similarly, every department in the company works so that the business goes ahead, the business achieves its objective, and you are no different, the work that you will do, the strategy that you will make, it has to be aligned with business goals and objective, right? You have to consider all the IT risks that you're going to find, by its impact to IT service and its impact to enterprise operations. Because don't you think, like, if, for example, the email service stops working, right? You are in IT. Again, the reason I keep taking IT example because I'm from IT, so excuse the bias. But look, let me for once not take an IT example. Think about it. Payroll software Sage. Let's say there is a problem with a particular software, right? Maybe forget Sage. Let's say you have an on-prem application that you have hosted through which you manage payroll, right? You send everyone's salary. Let's say it stops working. Do you think it will only hit the finance department? No, it will hit the whole company because nobody's salary would be credited. Same goes with IT. If the email service stopped working, the whole company is going to be affected, not just IT, right? So, for example, right, let's talk a positive example. Let's say that I am Google and I want to increase my market share by 20% over the next 5 years, right? So, which means that all the departments are going to get in line with how I can achieve this, including the risk team. The risk team, which is essentially you, will find or make a strategy. How are we going to manage the risk? Because the company is going to increase the market share by 20%, which means more businesses, more offices, more people, more assets buying, the scope of risk increases. So you will basically contemplate how are we going to make a risk strategy to ensure that it is in line with the business objective, which is that they want to increase market share by 20%, right? And whenever you talk of risk strategy, the support from senior management is paramount. There's nothing much we can do if the support from senior management is not there. Well, you would not have a risk management program function if there's no support from senior management, right? So if the question comes in the exam, you have to understand that support from senior management is of the utmost importance, right? And of course, risk appetite should also be aligned with business objective. For example, right, your organization is a startup, right? It wants to maybe expand its market share, open another office in another location, etc., right? So because it's a startup, the company said that, look, we are only going to accept a risk level of XYZ, or they are going to say that I'm only going to accept a risk level of losing, say, $10,000 a year, right? So your risk appetite here would be $10,000 a year. Again, what is risk appetite? We'll study in detail later, but for now, I'm just telling you, risk appetite is the appetite of an organization to take a risk in pursuit of its objectives, right? Simple example, you want to go from A to B. You took a car, you went from A to B, but you also realize that there's a risk within driving. There's a risk of accident, right? So what do? Well, you accept the risk. That's a nominal risk. You have a driver license, you know how to drive, you are in normal condition, not inebriated, etc. So when I say risk appetite, any organization that make risk appetite is of course aligned with the objective that the organization want to achieve. Okay. Now, organization goals, objective, and strategy, right? Like I said, anything that a department does has to be aligned with organization business objective, and so does the risk management that you are going to perform. When you do a risk management, you will also be making a policy that's called risk management policy. There could be an internal process. How do you do risk management process? You might make a procedure, basically written with everything that you do as a department, right? That has to be aligned with organization business objective. If the organization, for example, tomorrow decides that I'm going to hire 500 people, well, and open a new office, well, that's a lot of work for IT people and a lot of work for you, which means that you have to evaluate the risk. Tomorrow, let's say the business objective is that I need to save some money. So I am going to get rid of all the on-prem servers and I'm going to move to cloud, AWS maybe. Well, then you have to do the whole risk assessment. What is the risk if the organization moves to cloud, right? So you see how everything you are doing is aligning to business objective. Any questions? Okay, so you see how wherever the steering of business objective goes, the risk management follows. It's as simple as that. Business decides something, I will do X. You will decide what's the risk there. Business decides I'll do Y. Then you will decide what's the risk there, right? And when I say decide what's the risk there, the whole risk management. Okay. Now, IT governance, of course, you will have board of director and senior management who will be governing the whole thing that you're doing. Don't think you are alone. You will be reporting to senior management, and of course, everything that you will do will go as a report to board of directors. Basically, they would be looking at a very high level of data that the risk management team has identified that finance has 10% of risk, this has 2%, it has reduced significantly from last month, blah blah blah. The whole reporting structure works, right? So your stakeholders are senior management, board of directors, and the whole company, right? Now, who will tell what's the risk appetite of the company? Who will say what is the risk tolerance level for a company? Well, senior management. Remember, and I will keep repeating this throughout the course, is that your job is of a consultant. You are the expert on risk. You do not make decisions. You give data to senior management so that they make decisions, right? Why? Well, because they know the business objective inside out. You are running a risk management department. They know every department, and they have resources and authority to take decisions, right? So if they, they define the risk appetite, because if they don't define the risk appetite, it might be not aligned to business objectives. So, it's always the senior management who says that, look, what, we are as a company doing very good, right? We are a 20-year-old company. We have got 3 rounds of funding, a lot of money. Let's take risk. Let's open a research and development branch. Happy days, company can take more risk. Another company could be like, what, we are a startup. We recently had a data breach. We cannot take any risk. My risk appetite for this year is very less. Okay, so you see how the cards are being played by the senior management. Okay, now RASI matrix. I'm sure all the managers there, this would ring a bell, right? RASI matrix is nothing but around the whole structure, roles, and responsibility, right? If for people who don't know this, RASI matrix is a project management definition or a word, right? It means R stands for responsible, right? A for accountable, C for consulted, I for informed, right? What does responsible means? Well, I take a very simple example, right? It's a person who is responsible for doing the task. For example, me, my manager gives me a task, I just do it. I'm responsible for it, but am I accountable for it? No, right? The person who is ultimately answerable for the task completion is manager, right? Now, manager might not know 100% of this task. So what they have done is taken a consultant, maybe you, right? Who they are subject matter experts, whose opinions and feedbacks are taken, right? And the next is informed. When informed would be somebody who is closely watching from a high level, maybe as a supervisor, maybe it could be senior management, right? So I hope this makes sense, right? Well, often the example that I take here is, as a kid, my mom used to send me outside to bring things for whenever guests came, right? So the way I learned is this: if my mom sends me something to buy milk, for example, to make coffee or tea, I am the responsible person, right? Am I accountable if I don't bring it and I just spend the money on whatever I like? No, accountable would be, my mom, because people are going to ask the questions to mom, hey, where's the milk? Where's the tea? Right? Consulted, well, if my mom doesn't know how to make milk or tea here very well, she would ask my sister maybe, so she is consulted. Informed, well, maybe, my dad, who is keeping an eye on the whole thing and the guests are waiting, right? So again, it will be very, very, there will be definitely questions on RASI metrics, right? So I think it's one of the simple things from the course, right? Now, organizational culture and structure, right? You remember I told you a thing that when you have a meeting with stakeholders and you ask them, can you tell me the risk and findings or things that are a bit dodgy within your department? Don't you think they would be reluctant for a while? That who is this guy that I have to tell my risk to him? Which means it points to a culture. If the company has a good culture, which means that they don't run away from risk and that they, sorry, I have to plug in the charger. Right. Sorry, I was saying that if the company has a good culture, that they do not, everyone is not afraid of talking about risk, and they don't run away, or they don't try to sweep it under the rug, or they don't think that, look, somebody's questioning my baby, how come they do that? That's a bad culture, right? If everyone is open about the culture, open about the risk, they are not afraid of talking about the risk, it means a good risk culture, right? So who impacts the culture? Senior management. It's the job of senior management, right? Well, at the end of the day, if you ask granularly, it's everyone's job, but senior management mostly impacts the culture, which impacts the organization behavior towards risk management. If senior management itself, they are running away from risk, like, why take extra work if they say, this, you are not bringing me revenue, etc., etc. These are, again, bad culture examples. So why do I say that? Well, there would definitely be questions around risk and blame culture, right? So if the culture is good, which is made by senior management, the risk culture would be good, and hence the whole risk management process would be very smooth, right? So, right, if an organization, like I said, hides problem or any risk that is identified, they will keep mum about it. It's not a good culture, and it will affect, at the end of the day, your ability, risk practitioner ability, to protect company, right? Because what are you doing? You are basically managing risk so that it doesn't hurt company. If people start hiding risk, well, you can't do much, right? So first of all, let's say that you identified there's no incident response process, right? Sorry, not you. I mean, there's a risk within a company, and they don't tell you that there's an incident response process. If you find it, that's a different story. But let's say that you don't know, and they have hid the fact. Well, let's say incident happens. They will respond however they think, like in an ad hoc manner. But if they had planned out all the things, they have written an exact step-by-step plan. If incident happens, this is the escalation cycle, call him, do this, do that. Don't you think they will be able to handle the incident better? That's where culture comes in. Okay, so again, the beginning, there's common organization culture going on within different organizations. Some company would be reactive, some people would be compliant. So again, this whole life cycle goes in a straight manner. It starts with them being vulnerable, then them being reactive, then they are like, okay, you know what, we are going to comply with it, and then they proactively manage the risk, and they are resilient, which means it's a way of life. So vulnerable means very bad stage, resilient means they are thriving. Okay, now risk appetite. I know I had introduced this term before, but formally introducing it is basically means the level of risk an organization is willing to accept to pursue its objective, right? If an organization wants to open an office, let's say in London, well, there is a certain amount of risk involved. What if something fails, something bad happens? What if we don't comply to legal regulation? What if we don't comply to this and we get fined? What if we make a mistake in knowing the local laws and end up hurting ourselves later? Again, I'm not an expert on these whole legal, regulatory, and contractual requirement, but you know the drill. You know what I'm saying, right? So again, risk appetite of the organization is something that they set so that they can pursue the objective. They'll be like, okay, you know what, we are expanding our market share by 50%. If this is the level of risk I have to take, well, so be it. I'm going to take the risk, right? Now, how does it translate with higher risk or lower risk appetite? If the organization is risk prone, means risk appetite is higher, and if the organization is risk averse, the risk appetite is low. Risk prone, risk averse simply means if the organization is pro risk, and if risk averse means they are running away from risk. Don't you think if you are you are a huge company like Google, and don't you think you will be risk prone, right? You would want to take risk because you have a lot of money. You have not much to lose, or at least even if you lose, it wouldn't be much. But if you're a startup, don't you think your risk appetite would be low? That's what it means, right? It also depends on risk culture. If the risk culture, do they want to embrace the risk, or do they want to cautiously accept the risk, or they want to outright avoid the risk, right? That would decide organization is risk prone or risk averse, right? So risk culture is nothing but what's the company's behavior towards risk, right? Now, what is the example here? Example is that if you do not comply with a policy, it's a high risk, right? You tell staff to do X, Y, Z, and nobody does anything. That means it's a high risk. Okay, that's my alarm for half break. We'll just probably complete a few more slides, and then we'll call it a day. Just 2 more slides, right? Now, business process review, right? Where does this come from? Well, the concept that I'm trying to state here is that business process owners are best to provide feedback on how effective is a particular IT system, right? So how do I say that? Let's say that you bought an IT system. Maybe, how do I say that? Let's say you bought enterprise risk management software, or, customer relationship management system, payroll system, asset management system, anything. A system could be anything, right? So if a particular system is working, let's say in this case, payroll system, right? If it's working or not, who's the best person to ask it other than the owner of that particular business process, right? If the owner of that business process, let's say the director of that department, says that this software through which we do major of our work is working fine, but these are the things that are not working, they are the best people to say that, because they are the ones who are handling it. We as an IT, what we might do is we can procure, do the whole risk assessment, and give that software to them, saying that, okay, these are the licenses we have bought, you can start using that. You don't have to worry about licensing, capacity, etc., etc. You just use it. But I as an IT will not be using it on a daily basis. It will be them who are using it, right? So they are the best person to tell you if a particular system is effective or not, right? Now, yeah, one more thing I want to, actually, there has been a couple of questions around this, is that, value, right? What is the asset of value? Sorry, value of assets, apologies. What is the value of assets, right? Let's say that your mobile phone is lost, God forbid, but let's say if it's lost. Do you think only you are going to, let's say, lose $1,000 if you're having an iPhone or maybe Samsung Galaxy or whatever? No, well, because your data is lost. So the loss, even though it's not tangible, it could be significantly more. Your data is there. Translate it into company. Let's say there's a web server, right? Or let's say a website, maybe an intranet website, or whatever website of a company. The website may cost only $100 to maintain per month, maybe, but it might be generating a revenue of $1,000 per month, right? So you cannot be like, what, if this website stop working, the loss will be only $100. No, you have to see, whenever you are calculating the value of an asset, think of how much business it is supporting, right? So again, like I said, web server is the best example I take. You buy a web server, you're running a you buy a server, use it for website, make it a web server, it's running fine. The market cost is $1,000, fine. But if that stops working and you don't have redundancy, you might be looking at significantly more money, because it supports a bigger business process that generates more revenue, right? Okay, now what business case? Again, I just put a few words, but I'll explain what business case means, right? Now, sometimes as an, how do I say that? Let's say you are a risk manager, right? All of you are going to be risk managers, right? At least, if you are giving that designation. But let's say that you are running a risk management program. You realize that you don't have an enterprise risk management solution. It's a software through which you can run a risk register in the cloud, maintain dashboards, create reports, etc., etc., right? So that's a risk management, enterprise risk management system, right? You don't have that. You want to buy it. So what do? You make a business case and go in front of the senior management. You explain the problem that, look, we have to use Excel sheets to document everything. The Excel sheets, the data, it cannot handle much data. We have problems creating reports. We have problems creating dashboards. The solution is that let's buy a ERM software. This is going to be the cost. What are the risks if we buy this ERM software? Well, the risk could be that you are basically trusting a third party and putting all your sensitive information onto a third party cloud. Returns would, auditors are happy. You are able to easily manage the risk. You are able to create licenses. Everyone is accessing the same folder. Accessibility is nice. Happy days, right? So that's what business case means. There might be some questions around business case, but business case basically means giving all the information to senior management, making a case out of it, and then let them make a decision. Okay, last slide before the break, right? Annual loss expectancy, right? Let's talk numbers, right? This is a way in which we find out the loss in numbers. So it's a quantitative risk analysis. Okay, now what is ALE, right? It's unlikely that you might be asked a question on this, but it's possible, right? Because there's a formula involved in everything, right? So again, it's probably might be a fresh concept for all of you. So what is ALE? ALE is nothing but annual loss expectancy. How much monetary loss you expect for a particular asset due to a particular risk, right? So what does ALE means? ALE is basically a multiplication of single loss expectancy into annual risk occurrence, right? Annual risk occurrence, as per the name, estimated number of times one incident can occur in 1 year. Simple as that. If the annual risk occurrence is, if it occurs once, fine. It can also be expressed in percentage, right? Now, single loss expectancy. Single loss expectancy is nothing but, how much potential loss you are looking at if a particular incident happens once, right? So let's take an example of a data center, right? If one time the flood comes, the loss will be, let's say, how do I say, $50,000. That's single loss expectancy if it happens once, right? Now, there's a way we calculate single loss expectancy as well. And this is something you might have to spend some time in the background, because I can only teach you the theoretical part here with an example. So single loss expectancy doesn't stop here. So but single loss expectancy is also here. It's nothing but asset value into exposure factor. Now, what is asset value? Asset value is asset value. What's the price of the asset? And exposure factor. Exposure factor means that if the asset is hit, how much of the asset would be exposed, right? Sometimes, if an incident happens, it is not mandatory the entire asset is damaged. Sometimes the 20% of the asset is damaged, sometimes 30%, sometimes 100%, right? But we need to have a percentage. So let's say that a particular web server was, how do I say, impacted due to some incident, but only 20% of it was affected. So the exposure factor could be, you can say that 20% or 0.2. Okay, exposure factor is calculated in percentage, right? All of this theory, let's talk an example, right? Let's say you are running a server, maybe email server, right? Asset value is $100,000, right? You estimate that if there is a cyber attack, it could result in a 30% loss of particular server value. That if a cyber attack happens, 30% of the value of asset would be lost. Am I with you? Right? So if this happens, 30% of the asset is lost. So how do you calculate that? The asset value is 100,000. Exposure factor is, 30% of the asset is going to be lost. So it's 0.3. 30% is nothing but 0.3. So what do? You multiply it, the asset value AV into EF. That's the formula here. So you calculate what do you calculate? You calculate the SLE, $30,000, right? Now this SLE will be fed here. We'll talk about it in the next slide. Oh, sorry. Right? Now, let's say that SLE is 30,000. You put 30,000 and annualized rate of occurrence is just, let's say, 1. It happens once a year. Or let's say if it happens twice a year. If it happens once a year, 30,000 into 1, annual loss expectancy is $30,000. If it happens twice a year, sorry, not month. If it happens twice a year, it means 30,000 into 2. 30,000 into 2. That's nothing but 60K, right? You keep increasing the ARO or decreasing, the level of value changes. So I hope this session made sense, everyone, and I hope it was not overwhelming. But we are going to take a break. Sorry, just a second. Right, but we are going to take a break, and it's. I hope everyone's okay. Any feedback till now? All good? Am I too fast?
No, all good.
Okay,
All good.
fantastic. Thank you, Manish. So I'm sorry if I'm not giving you much time for the break, but can we just please have a 20 minutes break and get back at 10 o'clock Indian timing?
Okay.
Okay, because we have a good amount of things to cover. Okay, and if it finishes before I let you go, don't worry about it. Okay, perfect. I'll drop a message in the chat and we'll see you in 20 minutes. Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. I hope everyone's back. Not sleepy yet. Right. So, right, we'll get started. Okay. Where we left off, and glad you all made it. Right. Yeah. I just need one of you to just confirm if you're able to see the full screen, please.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. Right. So we are in part B. So domain 1, part A is completed. We are in part B, which is the last part of domain 1. Once this is complete, which we will be able to in the next 1.5 hours, we will have successfully completed domain 1. And tomorrow, what I will be solely doing would be going through the question and answers, because I believe that that helps you understand a lot of concepts, right? So, right, and it also enables a lot of dialogues and discussions, right? So, what do I mean by that? Right. So I'll show you in a bit, okay, or probably tomorrow. By saying that, right, let's go. So second part is risk governance, right? Which first part was organizational governance. Now we are talking about how we do govern the risk. Okay. Now ERM is the first thing that comes into my mind, right? Now, again, just to assure everyone, all the contents that we are reading is aligned to the ISACA CRISC review manual, the latest one, and also it includes all the contents that you can possibly find. So don't worry about me missing anything. I wouldn't. It contains everything. Actually, extra bits are also there. But it's always good to not need it and have it, then have it and then need it and not have it, something like that, right? So ERM, right? Enterprise risk management. In simple words, it's a software that you use to manage risk. ERM system, that's what it is. There are CRM system, which means customer relation management. There are a lot of systems, right? Each to its own, right? So what does an ERM means? It's essentially a software to manage risk, but that's an oversimplification, right? This is a golden thing for all of you risk practitioners, is because you can use this software or system to do the whole risk management life cycle, to identify risk, to assess them, to manage them, to document them somewhere, right? Keep checking on it, keep getting notifications, see the dashboard, right? So again, as you already know, why do we do risk management? To prevent an organization from getting hurt, from protecting the organization from ability to achieve its mission, right? And when you do manage the risk, that's what happens, right? Again, so like I said, each to its own. If there is a when I say that, let's say the ERM is not there, what will happen? Each company, each department may be using a different methodology for risk assessment, right? So you remember when I said that you need to have a standardized risk management process? Well, let's talk what happens if we don't have it, right? So think about finance having its own risk management, HR having its own risk management process, right? I think I mentioned this before. You will not be able to find out how much risk is in which department. You will not be able to know which department is struggling, which department is thriving, which department is doing just okay, where do we need to put most of the resources. So that's why I mentioned that we need a unified risk management process, one way through which we identify risk, assess risk, report, and manage the risk. Okay. Now I'm going to take some time and show you the sample of enterprise risk management, because I want you to feel, because picture speaks 1,000 words. I used in my previous life an ERM called Protect. It's a Protect with an H, right? So what it means for you, all of you, is, how can I share this? Right. So I'll just Google view of the dashboard of the ERM software, right? So what this means is that, right, so let's say that you are using which is a good one, I can show you, not this one. Right, so this is one of the no, not this one, right? So this is what will happen if you use an ERM software. So where are you getting all of this data from? Well, all the risk that you have identified. So as you can see here, I'll zoom in a little bit. Oh, sorry, that's the max I can zoom. So as you can see, this is a dashboard. Now, again, remember, all this data is fed from all the hundreds of risk that you have put in your risk register. So here you are seeing a sample of risk with saying that these are the high score, medium score, trend is it's going upwards, low. You're seeing, data in terms of graphs. These many risks are overdue, these many risks are open, these many are medium, low, or high. You are seeing risk by category. You are seeing risk map. What do we mean by risk map? Risk map, as you can see, risk is likelihood into impact. So let's say a risk has likelihood of 4 and an impact of 5. So it will sit somewhere here, and then whatever category you want to assign it, you can assign it. Again, it's something we'll cover in detail in the later sessions. I just wanted to show you a couple of more dashboards. So you see, again, corporate risk profile. As you can see, these are the risks. I think I just showed you this, sorry. What else? This is risk register example. Yeah, so I think I've showed you a couple of risk dashboards. If I'm not mistaken, can I show you more? I think that should serve the purpose. Yeah, here you are seeing top 5%, top 5 vulnerabilities, top 5 entities. You can basically have any kind of dashboard. Think about it, like as you can customize it, basically what I'm trying to say, right? And it will show you all the stats. So it's a golden finding for auditors. They would love it if you show them this dashboard, and they will be like, so many, how many risks are high, how many are medium, how many are low, how many you have mitigated, what's the status, basically high level data. Now, why do we need ERM? Because that's what your stakeholders want to know. So let's say I'm a third party person to you, and I have come to you and I'm asking you that, can you tell me your risk posture of the entire organization? Well, then you will simply show me this dashboard. Do you think that you will be opening the risk register to me and showing these are the 100 risks, these are open, blah, blah, blah? No, you would just show me this dashboard, and I would know that, okay, you know what? These are the top risk, and these many risks are open, these are closed. Again, it's not showing here, but you get the drill, right? You can make that in the dashboard, right? So that's my intention of showing you the ERM software, that these are the kind of, any software you buy, you can customize the dashboard without going much into software and the details into that. Now, what would a sample risk register look like? It would look like this. You see, these are the reference ID, and they are categorized by risk, and they have put the risk description, calculated the risk, and then the action, what they are going to take. Actually, for this, I have made a very simple, my own risk register to showcase you. Again, it's at a very, very basic level. Company have very, very complicated. The bigger the company, the better the risk management process, the better the risk register they have. But because our intention is to learn, that's why I made a basic risk register, right? So anyone, how would you create a risk register? Well, simply by, let's say that if you have nothing, with minimal resource, you open an Excel sheet, you type risk ID and list down all the risks that your company has, right? You put down details such as, these are the assets. For this asset, this is the threat. For example, customer database. I'm going to only take one example. Let's say that there's a customer database. There's a threat of data breach because the clientele list is very huge, right? What's the vulnerability in that database? Well, the password is very low. Password is password 123, for example. So what is the risk here? What is the risk of threat exploiting the vulnerability? That's the risk description. That sensitive customer data within that database might be exposed, leading to financial damage, legal damage, and reputational damage. This is the risk. Because if the threat, which is the threat of data breach, right? If a hacker who's a threat agent who exploits this vulnerability, which means password, weak password, basically he guesses the password, he will be able to successfully breach the data. Sorry, successfully get into the customer database, which means sensitive information is exposed. Now, how do I calculate the confidentiality, right? I could very well say that, high, medium, or low. So before that, I want to show you figure wise, right? Now, here, as you see, we are using numbers, right? Because we are using 5x5 methodology. I'll show you what that means. If I assign a number, let's say 1 is very low, 2 is low, 3 is moderate, 4 is high, and 5 is very high, right? So you can also, instead of assigning numbers the way we have done, you can say that it's low or moderate or very low. If you use very low, that will be qualitative risk assessment. Remember, if you use data numbers like 5, 4, 1, that would mean quantitative risk assessment. So how are they interconnected? Think of here, right? As you know, I have given number 1 is very low, 2 is low, 3 moderate, 4 high, 5 very high, right? So let's say there is a risk. Its likelihood is moderate, right? But the impact is high. Sorry, impact here, again, you can take whatever, I just didn't find exact one, but let's say that impact is significant. Again, play of words. You can say that insignificant is moderate, whatever, So here, if you calculate this, so the likelihood is 3, impact is significant. You can see this is a medium risk, and the risk score is 9. So that's how you come up with a risk score. You can come up with a risk score saying that the risk is high, the risk is medium, or you can put a number and come to it. There's, again, look, this is a highly customizable thing. You can play with any words, with any data, as long as it makes sense, right? People sometimes they use 10 by 10 matrix, but again, if it will be difficult to map out what is 1 and what is 5 and what is 7, etc., etc. That's why, to make things simple, I have put a 5 by 5 matrix. When I say 5 by 5, that's the likelihood into impact, right? So the likelihood could be very low and impact could be very high, right? So likelihood could be any of this. Very low likelihood of flood happening, high chance of flood occurring, very low impact, very high impact, right? So here you can mix and match, right? Again, I'm trying to correlate these two as well. So think about this, right? This is another way of calculating, right? And this is purely qualitative, right? Say instead of this number that we have put here, we just put words. So we put that, okay, you know what, likelihood is very high, sorry, likelihood is high, and the impact is 4, right? So again, I don't know which is which, but you can probably pick a number, right? If let's say that risk is likely to happen, and if the risk happens, the impact would be medium high. Sorry, impact would be high, sorry, moderate. Sorry, this is the impact, right? So let's say that how do I do this? Imagine that this left side of the graph you are seeing is likelihood, and above what you are seeing is the impact. If I come and tell you that the likelihood is possible and the impact is moderate, so see, there you go, the risk that you have is medium. If I come to you and say that risk is very unlikely but the impact is severe, then where will it fall? It will fall here, medium. Am I making sense, folks? Any questions till here? I'm not done, but I just want to tell you how you can use either quantitative or qualitative both to calculate a risk. You're not limited by options, right? So here, what are we doing? Here we are using numbers, right? So I said that if the sensitive, again for the same example, if I said that the sensitive data is exposed causing to these many damages, the impact to confidentiality of data will be high, right? Because if something happens, it impacts the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of data. Remember, right? So what do we do? Here we put impact to confidentiality of data, integrity of data, and availability of data, right? So here impact is 5, right? Impact to confidentiality is 5, because if data is exposed, then it is no longer confidential. Integrity, again, the impact is good, but it's not the highest. Why? Because more impact is on confidentiality of data. Availability, well, if the data is gone, it's gone, but the impact is not as high as its impact to confidentiality, because it is sensitive data. The first thing we want to protect is its confidentiality, right? So here what we have put 5, 4, and 3. What does 5, 4, 3 means? As you can see, 5 means very high, 4 means high and moderate. So instead of this, you could also put, how do I say that? If you are doing qualitative, then you can just put, very high, or how do I say that? 5, again, 5, 5, very high, and 2 is low. Let me just put that for case. Okay. So, and right. So how do we calculate this? So in this case, we are using numbers, right? We are saying that if sensitive data is exposed, the impact to confidentiality will be very high. The impact to integrity will be 4 as in high, and impact to availability will be 3, which is moderate. At the end, what happens? Then we talk about likelihood, right? Likelihood is what? What is the likelihood of this threat exploiting this vulnerability? The likelihood is 4, which means that it is high, right? Now, forget about qualitative. Now let's calculate this number. So what is risk? You know the formula. Risk is likelihood into impact. What is the impact to total impact? 5 plus 4 plus 3, which is nothing but 12. And what is the likelihood? Likelihood is 4. So 5 plus 4 plus 3, that is 12, into 4 is 48. Right? Now, as an organization, you can set that, look, my risk appetite is going to be 10. Simple. So anything that's above 10, you need to address it. Anything that's below 10, you accept it. So what does it mean? Is it above risk appetite? Yes. So then you talk to the senior management. They will tell you that yes, we can mitigate it. Or they can say that, you know what, even if the risk is very, very high, we can't do anything. Again, look, that's a discussion we'll have in domain 3. Right? So what is the decision that came out? Yes, we are going to mitigate it, and we are going to improve our password policy. You remember, folks, password was very weak. That's the vulnerability. Now what happens? They have decided that they will improve their password policy, increase it to 12 characters, alphanumeric, valid for 90 days, blah, blah, blah. Who is the risk owner? Assign a person. Now that you have done everything, now let's say that you have implemented a password policy, right? Or everything is uncontrolled. Now you come again, and then again you calculate the same thing that you calculated before. Because now that you have you have a control, right? You have a strong password policy. So the chances of risk happening and its impact is, it's less. 211 is the impact, and likelihood is also very less. Residual risk score is what? 2. Right? You understand how that worked? 2 plus, so it worked like 2 plus 1 plus 1, that is 4. And then you multiply it by the likelihood, that becomes 8. And that's why you accepted it. I know it's overwhelming. Any questions till now?
Yes, I have a question. I think so. The sheets 1 and 2 that you have shared, it's all linking to the qualitative risk assessment itself.
Both.
What you've shown initially for quantitative, we need to pick up ALE, SLE, ARO, those factors, right? Which is not seen over here.
Yes, you are right. You can include that into here, right? Like I said, I made a very basic risk register because I wanted to explain it. But you can always keep on adding more feature. You can add ALE, you can add risk by category, the percentage, if the risk has been increasing or decreasing, how old are the risks. Like I said, you are absolutely right when you say that. You can add it, but I just did not because I wanted to explain the concept. But yes, you're right. You can put ALE and everything here. If it happens, what would be the loss annually? You can take a factor into consideration.
Okay, sure. Thanks.
One question I have is, you have put impact, confidential, integrity, and availability, but generally in a risk register, there is only one impact column. So what
exactly, and you can have it that way as well. You're absolutely right. I think we both are right. It depends on organization to organization. I did exactly the same thing what I'm showing you. Their organization, like you rightly said, they only put one impact, right? But I believe that, again, like I said, you can make it more simple. You can customize it to make more complicated. At the end of the day, I'm just showing you the concept. So if I were to remove these 3 and put only one impact, it would still be the same. Likelihood into impact, which is here. Right? In that case, the number would be less, in which case the score would be less, in which case, risk appetite would be again ratioed. But you understand the drill, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I got it.
Yeah. So my goal is not to play with number or words here. My goal is to show you how a risk register works. Your risk register could be significantly different than that, but the basic concept remains the same, that you have to calculate a risk score. For how will you calculate risk score? By multiplying likelihood into impact. So your likelihood and impact are mandatory factor, right? Impact, you can split it into 3, you can split it into 1, right? But likelihood and into impact you have to do, and you have to come up with a risk score. Once you have a risk score, you have to identify a risk appetite. And then you have to evaluate. Remember, folks, we studied the risk evaluation. This is evaluation. Current risk score, this, okay, let us identify each steps.
Just
This is
one more
risk.
question. Where did you get risk appetite 10? You assumed
I-
that your
senior
organization
management.
appetite is 10.
No, my senior management set it up. Fantastic question.
Okay.
Yes. How do, look, I am in a consulting position, like I said. I talked to my manager and he said that, you know what, this is the appetite we can set. Let's set it to 10. Because example, let's say I set it to less, maybe 5. Then more than 80-90% of my risk would be above appetite. So most of the risk would be above. So it's a calculated decision a company made that makes, that's the reason when before the starting of the training, I said that, look, it is logical, but it's not exactly maths. You can do it your way, I can do it my way, as long as we are pointing in the same direction.
Yeah, got it.
Okay. Now, to answer your, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. And also, since I see the asset that you've mentioned in column B, I'm assuming that this is an asset-based risk assessment.
Yeah, I mean, see, for every risk, there would be an asset in the question. Don't you think that? It could be people. If there is a risk of, employee retention, then the asset would be people.
So how about, so what's the difference between like an asset-based risk assessment or a scenario-based or a process-based? Because I know in CISM also we did talk about these aspects.
You're right. And, I would probably say two things can be true at the same time. You can do it together. So for example, scenario-based risk assessment, what if flood comes in, right? If it comes in, there is an asset at question. Our company, maybe data center, maybe our own office. So don't you think in this scenario, an asset is going to be impacted? So again, look, like I said, I could make things very simple and delete this whole row. It would not matter at all. Because like I said, you can customize and add more question, anything you can add here. But my goal here is to show you that how a basic quantitative risk assessment is and how you would be doing it. If you had a software, you would be doing it in a portal.
Got it.
Any other questions? Okay, so this is important. So I'm going to probably take. Sure, go ahead, please.
Just want to understand that these impact and likelihood values, is that something which business users define, or we guide them to understand that what these values can be?
Well, so let's say you are a risk manager. You're having a meeting with all the stakeholders. You are not telling them any data. You are asking them data. So let's say that you are talking about sensitive customer data, right? You have a privacy team in place sitting right opposite to you. You ask them that, look, or forget about privacy team, any team in question. You ask them that, look, there's a threat of the data breach. I see your password policy is very less. How do you know? I am not going to get into that. You might have known, however, but you know that password is very less. Your password is password 123. So that makes a risk. So you ask them only, what do you think will be the impact if this data breach happens to the confidentiality of the data? Will it be very high? Will it be high? Will it be moderate? Will it be too low or very low? On a scale of 1 to 5, you ask them a question. What do you think the impact is going to be? So whatever data they say, you enter it here. Same goes for likelihood. At the end of the day, you calculate the risk score and then you tell them that, look, see, the risk that has come up is above our risk appetite. Right? Now, you find a risk owner, right? So again, if it's a finance department, somebody from that department would be risk owner. So you make a decision with them. Again, that's again domain 3.
Okay. So it's not our area of expertise where we'll tell them that,
Exactly.
this can be the likelihood or this can be the impact. We'll leave that decision for them to decide for their business what should be the impact and what should be the likelihood.
Fantastic. I couldn't have said that better. Thank you. Yes. So again, look, they might ask you for suggestion. Like, what do you think? In which case you are the liberty of saying I think it's 5 or I think it's very low. right? But at the end of the day, if and only if they say and take a decision, then can you put it in here? Look, I understand that it is a bit overwhelming now, because I usually in my previous session I use this in domain 3, but I just wanted to show you, because I spoke risk register is basically in domain 3, right? So we will circle back to this, don't worry about it. But as of now, don't get bogged up with the details. Just only know that there are two ways of doing risk analysis or assessment: qualitative and quantitative. Both are interrelated, right? You find the threat, you find the vulnerability, you find what is the risk that can happen, you find the impact, you find the likelihood, you come up with a risk score, right? And then you see if it's above your risk appetite or below. Then somebody makes a decision who will study later. It's not you, right? And then, once decision is made, accordingly an action plan will be made. If the decision was to accept it, there will be no action plan like you see here, right? Once we have accepted it, there is no action, right? And then you assign a risk owner, do everything, right? Okay. And then
sorry to interrupt you, but when you say you are accepting a risk, doesn't that mean that you are saying that you can never accept a risk, right? You can accept a risk means that you are taking exception, that for 5 years I'm accepting the risk, because let's say I don't have the finance to implement the controls or the mitigation plan which needs to be implemented. So you can create an exception plan. But
well, I mean, there's a subtle difference. Exceptions are like there is a particular policy or process we are following, and for this particular case I am just not going to do that. That means that there's going to be a huge risk, right, which we put in here and treat it as a risk. So that's a separate risk entry. But acceptance is again, I'm sorry if we are getting into details, but that's purely domain 3, right? What risk acceptance means, that you consciously accept the fact that there is a slight chance of risk happening, and I'm going to make my peace with it, and I'm not going to do anything. Same goes with your driving. Like I said, when you drive, there's a risk of things, right? But still you choose to drive, right? Because you accept the risk.
Okay.
Again, don't worry if you're getting a little bit confused here, but my point is that this is purely domain 3. We'll study in so much detail later onwards. Okay. So my point was that I wanted to show you how we can do it with quantitative and qualitative as well, right? So so for example, let's do it here. Look, I'm not going to go into detail and do qualitative in front of you to create more confusion, but look, you get the drill, right? I'm going to summarize everything we talked. The first thing that you have to be aware when it comes to risk register is it's a place where you put all the risk. See, that's why you have risk IDs. Okay, you can have n number of risk. You're going to calculate, you're going to write down data. What's the threat? What's the vulnerability? What's the risk description? So that anyone reading it knows that we are talking about this. Then you're going to calculate impact. How? I'll leave it to you. You're going to calculate impact. And when I say you are going to calculate, you're going to ask the person who is the risk owner. Who are potential risk owner? Again, we'll study in detail later. You'll calculate a risk and you'll see if it's above your risk appetite or below, and then you will take a decision. That's all. Okay. Any still questions that you have? Oh, sorry. Here, where was that? There we go. Right. Okay. So any still, do you have questions? Okay. I'll take it as a no. Look, this is the whole point of sessions. There's sometimes there's a lack of clarity, sometimes there's more clarity as we speak, but that's the way human interaction works, right? So I hope you have got a good idea of ERM. I showed you the dashboards. An enterprise risk management software would also have a place where you would do risk and risk register. I know I showed you an Excel sheet, but imagine that transferred to an online portal. You will be filling the exact same data, but in an online portal, right? So that's what enterprise risk management software is. It's a very helpful tool for all of you. I have, in my experience, worked with Excel sheets because the company was a startup, and I have worked with a very well licensed ERM industry standard in my previous life. So I find this always better, right? Because if you have to know the status, you can just open the dashboards, you can show your auditor, extract a report, send it to management, blah blah blah. Right now, enterprise security architecture. Right, it's a direct question actually that I put here, because that's how I want to explain the concept. Is enterprise security architecture is not just a fancy word. Remove enterprise security architecture. Right, security architecture, as you know by concept, is the security architecture for the whole company. Right, that's why it's a question actually from ISACA official resource, is that what's the main objective of developing enterprise security architecture? Simple, that the enterprise security architecture is applied to all of the organization. Right, to align security strategy among the functional areas of the organization and external entities, which is just a fancy way of saying that align these strategy that you are making to all the departments of the company. And if you have any external entities, you will have the same security architecture that you will apply to all of it. Now, I'm not going to get into detail what security architecture contains, but think of it as a security strategy or architecture where you are going to put what security solutions, where is firewall, where is router, how you are going to, create LANs, VLANs. Again, I'm not going to be a geek, but I hope you get the drill. Right, so that's what security architecture means. Again, same concept like risk management, it has to be applied company wide. Right, now, right, you have to understand, does the security architecture itself protect an organization? No. Security architecture is nothing but a blueprint of security that includes all the control that your organization has put. And when I say control, they are security controls. Right, so it protects you from external and internal. Right, so the controls can be external, as in, there could be a firewall sitting between your network and the internet. It could be internal, maybe, virtual LANs that you have put to secure special part of your organization. Right, we'll study more about this in domain 4 when I talk about DMZ and everything. But think of security architecture as an umbrella or a blanket that covers the whole organization, that protects you from external and internal threats. And the control, of course, you put is external and internal. Okay, now risk management strategy. Right, now when I say, whenever you are going to make risk management strategy, right, you, of course, I'm like a broken record on this, but I keep saying risk management has to be aligned with business objectives. Right, one more thing I want to add here is that risk management, whenever you're making a strategy, let's say that you just joined Facebook and there's no risk management there. Unlikely, I'm just giving you a hypothetical situation. So what do? I'll just probably turn on the lights, sorry. Yeah, so right, so when you're making risk management strategy, you also need to include the current state of risk as well as desired future state. Now, what does that mean? It basically means that if you joined a company which has no risk management process, don't you think you are starting out and there's no process at all, which means things are not as good as it can be. Right, so you note down that, look, this is where we are at ground zero, but this is not where we want to be. We want to be right there, I mean, a very good position. Our risk management program should be thriving. It should be optimized. So what do? You make so when you are making a strategy, you
Hello all. Can you see the slides? I think he's dropped off.
Yeah, he's not available.
Okay.
He will join in 2 minutes. We got response from WhatsApp. Archana replied.
Hello everyone. Subham sir has faced some technical issue. He'll be joining in 2 minutes. So please be patient and please wait for him. Only 2 minutes, Civil.
Um, Good day, folks. I think we will wait for another 5 minutes. I'm unable to contact actually Shubham. Um, so let's wait for another 5 minutes and let's see. I think he has some issues. That's the reason he's not able to join. So let us wait for another 5 minutes and then we can decide what we can do. I don't know why he's unable to join.
Yeah, sure. Anyway, it's going to be 11 o'clock, so we'll wait for another 5 minutes.
Yes, yes. Sorry for inconvenience. Sorry, very sorry. Guys, we are unable to contact Subham, so I don't know what the issue may be because he's from he's not in the India, he's outside, so I don't know what is the issue. So we can call off for the day today, and you people can leave for today, and for tomorrow's timing and all the session, we'll let you know in the WhatsApp group. Please check the WhatsApp group.
Yeah,
Sorry.
thank you.
Yeah,
Sure.
sorry.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, okay. Ayush, are you there?